There's a quiet shift that happens somewhere after 40 in how we speak. Most people don't talk about it, partly because they can't quite name it, and partly because it feels strangely private, as though the voice that we trusted for decades no longer behaves the way that it used to. We might open our mouths to speak and something feels just slightly off. Not wrong exactly, but just different. Maybe it's a hesitation perhaps, or a tightening somewhere in the throat, or just a faint sense that the words coming out belong to an older version of you, one who hasn't existed now for a while. This is unsettling in an odd kind of intimate way, because our speech is not just about our communication, it's our identity in motion. And when that voice shifts, it's usually because we've shifted too, but the world hasn't noticed yet. And that dissonance creates a tension between the self we've become and the self our voice still remembers. Perhaps in our younger years, we rarely think about how we speak. We just tend to speak. There's a kind of momentum of youth, all the energy, all that projection and ambition, and the need to be understood quickly and easily. But really, the older we get, the more our internal landscape changes. Life builds, it accumulates. It's not just our experiences, but it's layers and layers of meaning. And then something very subtle tends to occur. The language that we've been using starts to feel a bit thin. It's not that it's inadequate, it's just not quite equal to the weight of what we know. My experience has been that it's like trying to wrap up a decade of understanding into a single sentence that was designed for a single day, or at best a single week. No wonder it collapses under the strain. And then, of course, there's our professional voice, the one that so many of us have perfected, even unconsciously, over years. It's clear, it's competent, it's reliable. It's a voice that once worked for us beautifully until it begins to feel a bit like a costume that no longer fits us. And then speaking from that voice becomes tiring. Not because we're bored, but because it just doesn't carry the full truth anymore. It can't. You see, that voice was built for a different chapter of our lives. There is also something that's really deeply human and, generally speaking, misunderstood about expressing ourselves after 40. See, we assume that our communication gets easier over time as we age. After all, we've lived more, we've seen more, we've certainly survived more. And surely that should make our expression simpler. But our expression does not work that way. It runs on alignment, not on our experience. And our midlife is really the moment where that alignment becomes non-negotiable. Because we can't force our voice to say things that it no longer believes. We can't surely posture or look to impress or even imitate others with the same conviction that maybe we had when we were younger. There's just too much truth in us now, and surely too much self-awareness and too much life. Our voice refuses to perform in ways our younger self relied on. Now, this is not a decline. It's the opposite. It's our psyche that's refusing to let us fragment ourselves any further. And the result, often, well, it's silence or hesitation. The sense that our tongue is suddenly made of metal, some heavy material. But silence has an interesting midlife purpose. It's what happens when our identity is rearranging itself quietly beneath the surface, just like this river, our expression also is searching for a new shape. And that search takes time. If you want to gain a clearer picture of why communication becomes so strange after 40, then there are a few truths that really are worth knowing. The first truth in my experience is that our language becomes autobiographical. We aren't simply saying words anymore, we're carrying a weight of history inside each one. What we've lost, what we've learned, what we've loved, what we'll never again pretend about. The second truth is that our emotional range changes, not necessarily in breadth, but in nuance. We can become more attuned, more perceptive, more sensitive to tone itself. But we're not always perhaps sure how we should express that sensitivity without feeling exposed. And then the third, and perhaps the most important truth I found, is that our internal editor grows louder. Not cruel exactly, but just very vigilant. We've lived long enough to know how words can land and how they can be misunderstood. So we speak sometimes with greater care, and sometimes that care can mute the very thing that makes our voice alive. But beneath all of it, beneath the care, the silence, that new weight, lies something much more interesting. We're not losing our voice. We're refining it. The older we get, the more we want our words to mean something, not to impress, not to perform, not to show off, but to carry the quiet truth of our experience and to share with others. And that requires a different kind of speech, one that's slower, more aligned, more honest, and frankly less afraid of being fully and boldly ourselves. So if you've found yourself speaking less or hesitating or just feeling as though the words don't quite match the person you've become, then give yourself space, because this is not a decline in your communication. It's really the beginning of a deeper level of communication. You're shedding the old layers, that professional polish, those automatic answers, the borrowed language that you inherited almost without knowing it, and you're finding a way of speaking that belongs only to you. Our expression evolves with our identity, and our identity evolves with our truth. And if our voice feels a bit quieter right now, well, it's only because it's listening for the next version of you to tell it what to say.